NASA's James Webb Space Telescope has hardly opened its eyes, and the universe is new. More mysterious, more beautiful than humanity's dreams.
NASA just shut down the $10 billion James Webb Telescope after it caught something insane on Mercury. Signals, buried tech, and secret cover-ups. What are they hiding? Today we're revealing everything they don't want you to see. But first we need to go back to where it all started. The launch of the most powerful space telescope ever built. Okay, so let's start with the star of this story, literally and figuratively, the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST for short. This thing is huge in the space world. It's NASA's most expensive and advanced space telescope ever, costing around $10 billion to build and launch. It took years of planning, testing, and delays before it was finally launched into space in December 2021. Now, JWST isn't just floating around near Earth. It's been placed at a very special spot called Lagrange Point 2, also known as L2. This is about 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth, in the opposite direction from the Sun. That spot helps the telescope stay super stable and cool, which is important for its job. So what does JWST actually do? In simple words, it takes really, really good pictures of space, like clearer and more detailed than anything we've seen before. It can detect light from 13.6 billion years ago, which is pretty much the beginning of the universe. The telescope has infrared vision, which means it can see light that our eyes can't. Even light coming from the oldest galaxies, hidden behind clouds of dust. Most people think JWST is only used for deep space stuff, like looking at galaxies far, far away. But that's not the full story. JWST is also used to look at planets and moons in our own solar system. That includes Jupiter, Saturn, and yes, even Mercury. In early 2024, NASA announced that JWST would be focusing its powerful lenses on Mercury, the closest planet to the Sun. According to official statements, the telescope was supposed to study Mercury's thin exosphere, basically its almost non-existent atmosphere, and map the surface temperature using infrared. Nothing shady, just normal science, right? But here's where things start to get suspicious. Some scientists and space enthusiasts think there's more to this Mercury mission than NASA is telling us. Why would they use their most advanced telescope to look at a planet they've already studied a bunch of times before? Especially one that's so small, airless, and insanely hot. People began to ask, did NASA know something strange was happening on Mercury? Did JWST see something it wasn't supposed to? Now you might be thinking, why Mercury? Why would NASA or anyone care so much about a planet that's literally a giant burning rock? Well, Mercury is actually a pretty strange place. It's the smallest planet in our solar system, and also the closest to the Sun. Because of that, it gets insanely hot, like over 400 degrees Celsius during the day. And at night, it gets freezing cold because there's barely any atmosphere to hold in the heat. That's already weird.
Scientists have always found Mercury a bit confusing. For example, it has a magnetic field, even though it shouldn't. Mercury is too small and should have cooled down a long time ago. But somehow its core is still active, and that's what creates the magnetic field. Nobody knows why that is. Another mystery? Ice at the poles. Even though Mercury is blazing hot, its poles are tilted in such a way that parts of certain craters never see sunlight. When NASA's older missions looked there, they found frozen water. How did that water get there? No one knows for sure. And then there's the surface itself. Back in 2012, NASA's Messenger spacecraft was orbiting Mercury and using radar to check out the surface. It found some really strange radar reflections, especially in a crater called Kandinsky. The reflections looked metallic, as if there was something shiny buried under the dust and rocks. That kind of return signal usually comes from man-made or artificial structures. But instead of investigating further, NASA kind of brushed it off. The data was quietly archived, and nobody talked about it again. So when JWST started observing Mercury in early 2025, a lot of people were like, wait, this again? It felt more like NASA was following up on something they already knew, not just doing random science. And that's where all the conspiracy theories began. All right, so this is where things start to get really strange. While JWST was observing Mercury, something happened that wasn't supposed to. According to a post on a dark web astronomy forum, someone claimed that the telescope picked up a signal, not just random static or space noise, but an actual repeating transmission coming from a specific spot on Mercury called the Caloris Basin. If you didn't know, the Caloris Basin is this huge crater caused by an ancient impact. It's one of the biggest on any planet in our solar system, but apparently it might be hiding more than just rocks. Now, the post didn't just say there was a signal. It said that the pattern of the signal looked like binary code. That's the kind of code computers use, just a bunch of ones and zeros. Some people tried to say it was just radar bouncing off the surface or something natural, like solar interference, but others weren't so sure. They said it felt too clean, too organized to be random. It was like someone or something was trying to send a message. The person who posted about this was an Italian postdoc, basically a young scientist doing research after getting their PhD. They even showed what looked like a screenshot of the data waveform and claimed it came from JWST's instruments. The post blew up fast. People started asking questions. Some said it was a hoax, but others were convinced it was real. And then, poof, the original post disappeared. The entire thread was deleted from the forum, and the user who posted it, all their accounts vanished across different platforms. Reddit, GitHub, LinkedIn, everything gone. Just like that.
At the same time, something weird happened on NASA's own website. The page where they were uploading info about Mercury's observation got taken down. The official reason? Data integrity maintenance. That's a fancy way of saying they were checking things for errors. But why do that right after a leak? Coincidence? Maybe. But the timing feels way too perfect to be random. Normally, JWST's data is super open. Like, even for major galaxy discoveries, NASA uploads most images and info to public databases within a few days. Scientists and even amateur space nerds around the world are able to access it. But for this particular observation of Mercury, nothing. No images, no reports, not even boring infrared charts. It was like it had never happened. Then, a few scientists on Twitter started speaking up. They said they were supposed to receive raw imaging and spectroscopy data from the Mercury scan, but their access was revoked without any warning. Just gone. Like someone had hit the delete button or moved the files behind a wall. Meanwhile, a couple of amateur astronomers, the people with their own telescopes who track satellite positions, said they had been following JWST's orientation. And guess what? They noticed that JWST suddenly pointed away from its expected targets. Like, it was scheduled to look at a distant galaxy cluster, but instead it was somewhere else. And then NASA put out a very short press release. It said JWST had been temporarily suspended for instrument recalibration. No big deal, right? But there was no mention of Mercury, no mention of any kind of strange discovery or delay in data, just vague words that didn't really explain anything. So what do we make of all this? On one hand, it could all be nothing. Just tech problems and maintenance. Happens all the time, right? But on the other hand, when you look at the timing, the missing data, the deleted whistleblower post, and the sudden silence, it starts to feel like someone hit the emergency brakes. Like they found something they weren't ready to share. After the whole signal from Mercury rumor and the sudden data lockdown by NASA, some independent space researchers and even a few ex-scientists started putting together theories. One of the biggest ones? That Mercury might be hiding ancient artificial structures, like alien tech buried deep under its surface. Now, I know that sounds like science fiction, but let's break down what they're saying. So first, remember those metallic radar reflections spotted by NASA's Messenger mission back in 2012? At the time, they showed up in a few craters, mostly near the planet's poles. NASA didn't really explain what caused them, just said it might be ice or minerals. But some people never forgot those readings.
Fast forward to JWST's observations, and things get even weirder. Apparently, a few images from JWST's Mercury mission briefly made it online, and in one of those leaked pictures, there were these hexagon-shaped patterns seen inside one of Mercury's shadowed craters. Hexagons. Like, perfect ones. And that's not something nature does often, especially on a planet that's constantly bombarded by solar radiation and meteors. In engineering, hexagons are used all the time because they're strong, symmetrical, and efficient for structures. Think of honeycombs, nuts and bolts, tiles. Hex shapes are used when you need stability and balance. But on Mercury, in random craters, that raised a lot of eyebrows. Some people think what we're seeing could be the roof or surface of a buried structure. Others believe it might be part of an ancient satellite station or base. Maybe something left behind by civilization that visited the solar system long ago. And honestly, it kind of makes sense. Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere or weather, so if something was built there a long time ago, it might still be preserved under dust and rock. Now let's talk about real science, because even without the alien theories, Mercury is already one of the weirdest planets in our solar system. First off, Mercury has a giant metal core. Like seriously, it's massive. Scientists say the core takes up about 85% of the planet's volume, which is way more than expected. For comparison, Earth's core only makes up about 55% of its volume. And here's the weird part. If Mercury formed like the other planets, it shouldn't have such a huge core. Most rocky planets have a thicker crust and mantle, but Mercury's outer layers are super thin, almost like the planet is just a big ball of metal with a shell on top. That made scientists ask, how did this happen? Some believe that long ago, Mercury might have been hit by a huge object that blasted away most of its outer layers, leaving behind the core. But even that doesn't explain everything. In radar studies and gravity scans, scientists found that some parts of Mercury's surface have strange features. There are large, plate-like areas that look like pieces of crust were sliced and shifted. When viewed under certain radar filters, these pieces even look like access panels or hatch covers, something you'd expect on a machine, not a planet. In 2023, a research paper from the Planetary Science Journal mentioned gravitational dips found in some regions. Basically, the gravity in those places doesn't match the rest of the planet, as if there are huge empty spaces underneath the surface. That's a big deal because it could mean there's more going on inside Mercury than we thought. So here's where things really start to sound like a movie plot. After JWST finished observing Mercury and that strange transmission was allegedly picked up, people inside NASA started acting weird. According to some insiders, like contractors who weren't even supposed to talk, a special emergency protocol was activated. It's not something you hear about in science documentaries. This one's real low-key and secret.
The group that stepped in is something called the Deep Systems Group. It sounds like a cool hacker team, but apparently it's a real thing. It's been around since the 1970s and is made up of high-level experts who get involved only when something major happens in space, especially if it could lead to global panic or political drama. Their job? To take over, shut things down quietly, and decide what information goes public and what doesn't. After JWST's Mercury mission, this group supposedly ordered NASA to pull the plug on the telescope's live feed and lock down all public data. They didn't just pause the mission. They wanted to review everything, behind closed doors. No leaks, no public scientists, no space bloggers, just hush-hush meetings. And get this, it wasn't even NASA making the final decision. According to some sources, the order actually came from a national security agency. That's right, not scientists, not astronomers, but people in the intelligence community. Why would they care so much about space images? Maybe because they thought this could be way more than just rocks or signals. Maybe they thought it was something that could freak people out or disrupt the world order. We've seen similar things happen before, like the face on Mars in the 1980s, that weird rock formation that looked like a human face. The images were super popular at first, but then NASA suddenly shut down talk about it, saying it was a trick of light and shadows. Same with the Cydonia region on Mars. People believed they saw pyramids and structures there. Government agencies labeled it as pareidolia, a fancy word for seeing shapes that aren't really there.
So now, with Mercury and JWST, it feels like history repeating itself. Something big may have been found, but instead of being excited, the people in charge went full lockdown mode. If this blew your mind, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves space mysteries, and don't forget to subscribe for more crazy discoveries like this.